Chapter 6. Ashley jumped at the sound of her doorbell ringing, grabbing her laptop just before it crashed from the sofa onto the family room floor. Since she returned from Ethan's parole hearing that morning, every noise the landscaper mowing the lawn, the neighbor dog barking, and even the children playing had chipped away at her nerves. She couldn't get the image of her ex-husband's face out of her mind, couldn't quit hearing his words echoing in her ear, warning her that she'd be sorry for testifying against him. As anxiety, as anxious as she felt, she was lucky that she'd been able to concentrate long enough to finish her thesis. After working so hard, she almost missed the deadline. She inched into the foyer, her eyes glued to the lead glass front door, trying to identify the shadowy figure standing on the other side. With her imagination geared into overdrive, she feared it was a police officer here to inform her that Ethan had somehow managed to get away from the guard at the prison, that he had escaped and was coming after her. At least she knew it wasn't her ex-husband looming at her doorway. He wouldn't ring the bell, he'd just bash the door in. As the man on her front porch turned, she recognized the familiar brown shirt and shorts he wore, a UPS uniform. She'd forgotten that the sample wedding invitations she ordered were scheduled to arrive today. Relieved, she stepped further into the foyer. Since the delivery didn't require a signature, Ashley waited until the driver returned to his truck and backed onto the street before she retrieved the package. As she closed and locked the door and rearmed the security system, an unsettling thought struck her. Ethan could still harm her even from behind bars. It was anyone's guess what kind of contract he made while in prison. He was sure to have met many hardened criminals, most likely had gotten to know a few murderers. He could send one of them to terrorize her, maybe even persuade one of them to kill her. She inspected the package, double-checked the return address, making sure the box really contained the invitations and not a surprise from her ex. She was convinced Ethan had already thought of a million different ways to fulfill his promise of making her sorry. Heading back to the family room, she pushed her thoughts of her ex-husband aside and opened the package. As she arranged the sample wedding invitations across the top of the mahogany coffee table, she wondered which one Brett would like. Would he choose the laser-cut Botanica design, the deep plum monogram card with silver ribbon, or the intricate card adorned with seed pearls? What if he didn't like any of the invitations? With the tensions between them, she hoped he wasn't reconsidering the wedding. They never fought before. She knew all relations had their ups and downs, but until now, their connection had been so strong. It had felt as though nothing could rock it. Maybe if they had argued in the past, their quarrel wouldn't feel so intense. As it stood now, it seemed as though her fiancé was overreacting. There had to be a reason. Brett was definitely mulling over something. He told her he wanted to skip his normal breakfast of scrambled eggs that morning and had even gone outside on the patio to drink his coffee alone rather than stay inside with her. Ashley ambled toward the back door, wondering how to repair the rift between herself and her fiancé. She gazed across the patio and noticed Brett coffee mug still perched on the edge of the round teak outdoor dining table. After turning off the security alarm, she headed out onto the patio. The afternoon sun seared the top of her head, the temperature having climbed into the high 80s. She glanced across the lawn to her right and noticed Amanda sitting on a wicker chair next to the inflatable kiddie pool in the Robinsons' backyard. Xander giggled with glee as he splashed his mother's legs. Ashley met her neighbor's gaze for a brief second. She smiled and waved a greeting, but Amanda averted her eyes, focusing instead on her toddler. Her neighbor could pretend if she wanted, look the other way, but Ashley was certain Amanda had seen her, and she did. Her heart dropped. It was obvious Amanda no longer wished to associate with the backwood woman living next door. Ashley felt like an outcast in her own community. Would the other women in the cul-de-sac shun her as well? As though wanting to avoid a confrontation, Amanda pulled Xander from the pool and led him from their backyard onto their screen porch, shutting the door behind them, never acknowledging Ashley's presence. Dismayed by her neighbor's rejection, Ashley sank into the cushioned patio chair next to the table. She scanned the manicured lawns adjacent to her own, each home owned by a family similar to the one living beside them. All the other residents from the same social class, all comfortable in their surroundings. She didn't fit in here in Briarwood, and she no longer felt at home in Metler Ridge. Actually, hadn't in years, not since she moved to Chattanooga to attend the university. Where did she belong? Feeling as though her life was beginning to unravel, she picked up her fiancé's mug, trudged back into the house. On her way into the kitchen, she thought she heard a noise coming from upstairs. Ashley froze. She glanced at the clock on the fireplace mantel. Brett wasn't due home for at least another hour. In her heightened state, had she imagined the noise? The hairs on the back of her neck bristled as she stood rooted between the family room and the open kitchen, listening for the movement above her. She heard a thump. Footsteps. Someone else was inside the house. When she arrived home from the parole hearing, Ashley had plugged her cell phone into the charging station located upstairs in the master bedroom. There was no landline in the house, no way to call for help. She slid the coffee mug onto the kitchen counter and tiptoed to the foyer closet. Holding her breath, she edged open the closet door. Moving as silently as she could, she pulled a sand wedge from Brett's golf bag. Ethan had wasted no time sending someone after her. They must have slipped into the house while she was outside on the patio. Clenching a golf club with both hands, she eased up the steps, careful not to make a sound. She stopped on the landing midway up the stairway, her heart pounding in her chest as she strained her ears, trying to determine from which room the sounds had emanated. She heard footsteps again, in the master bedroom. Steadying her grip on the golf club, she crept up the remaining stairs into the hallway. The master bedroom door stood ajar. Fear ripped down her spine as she placed her hand on the middle of the door and nudged it the rest of the way open. The room was empty, the sounds now coming from the master bedroom. Raising the sand wedge above her head, she sneaked toward the open bathroom door. She caught movement out the corner of her eyes, glimpsed the figure of a man. Ashley leaped through the doorway, swinging the sand wedge with all her might. Go ahead, Ashley. Chapter 7. Ashley could hear her heart pounding in her ears as she shot through the master bedroom doorway, swinging the golf club straight toward the unknown man who had invaded her home. Brett jumped backwards just outside the arch of her swing. The head of the club struck hard, punching a hole in the bathroom drywall directly between the twin mirrors hanging above the vanity. "Are you crazy?" Brett yelled at her. Ashley caught her breath, shocked to find her fiancé standing half-dressed in the bathroom, his face red. "You're not supposed to be at home yet," she explained. "I thought you were a burglar." "Did you forget about the silent auction?" he asked, his tone unforgiving. The auction to benefit the children's wing of the hospital. Brett's father, a pediatric oncologist, was on the hospital board and had agreed to host the event at his home. Yes, with all the current upheavals in her life, she had forgotten. "I'm sorry, Brett. It completely slipped my mind." Had she remembered, she wouldn't have charged into the bathroom and made a fool of herself. Brett pulled the golf club from her hand and checked it for damage. Anger gleamed in his eyes. Ashley realized that by letting her imagination get the best of her and almost attacking her fiancé, she split the fissure between them even wider. Now more than ever, she wanted to confess her marriage to Ethan, explain everything she'd gone through, and beg Brett's forgiveness for keeping the secret so long. "Brett, get dressed," he ordered, leaving her standing alone in the bathroom. Ashley stared at her reflection in the mirror. She somehow appeared older now than she had just a week ago. Dark circles had formed under her blue eyes from lack of proper sleep, and her skin seemed to have dulled. The happy young woman who moved in just 5 short months prior, her future bright and full of promise no longer existed. She washed her face with cold water and reapplied her makeup. In an attempt to appear more sophisticated, she twisted her hair up on top of her head. Struggling with pins and different hair clips, she just couldn't achieve the effect she desired. In the end, she gave up, leaving her hair loose to cascade around her shoulders, the style her fiance preferred. In the closet, she found the full-length navy gown Brett had picked out for her a few weeks earlier. He purchased the dress specifically for the charity event. How could she let herself forget? Maybe because she dreaded spending the evening with his family. She felt so out of place among the elite Belle Haven, a mansion filled and clad for the wealthiest of Tennessee residents, and Brett's childhood home. When she finished dressing, she met her fiance in the family room. He looked so handsome in his tux, his dark hair perfect, his shoulders broad and well defined, and his waist narrow. She used to believe they made quite a striking couple. Now she wondered whether the term couple and all that it applied was still accurate. At least he's still acting like a gentleman, Ashley thought as Brett opened the SUV door for her and waited until she was safely in the seatbelt before climbing into the driver's seat. "Where did you go this morning?" he asked, catching her off guard. She wondered how he known that she left the house. Had he tracked her phone? Was he that suspicious of her now? "This morning?" she hedged, wondering how much he already knew, not quite certain what to say. "I left a client's folder behind, so I circled the neighborhood and came back. You were already gone." After leaving a parole hearing, she stopped at the bakery to pick up a list of options available for their wedding cake. She wouldn't be lying if she told him about that. "Just running errands," she said, trying to sound nonchalant, upbeat. "I went to Hoglands, picked out the flavors for the cake tasting. Do you still want triple chocolate for the groom's cake?" Brett hesitated. "I don't know," he finally replied, keeping his gaze fixed on the road ahead. The brashness in his tone made her wonder whether it was the flavor of the cake he was undecided about, or whether he was unsure that he still wanted to be a groom. She needed to find out where he stood. "Brett, about the whole thing with Ethan." "Now's not the time, Ashley," he cut her off. "I don't want to be arguing when we get to my parents' house. Let's just get through this evening. It's important to Dad." She ached for him to talk to her, to hash out his feelings so they could repair their relationship. But with anger apparent on his face, she decided to do as he asked and let the subject drop. They drove the remainder of the 25 minutes trip in silence. "Brett, what's up, man?" As they pulled into the driveway of Clark and Miranda's Holbrook's 3-story Southern Colonial estate, Ashley felt her stomach flutter. Today, of all days, she did not want to have to face Brett's parents or his younger sister Bianca, let alone all the high society members she knew would be in attendance. She took her fiance's arm as they walked along the brick pathway leading onto the black lawn. Eyeing the dozen of guests who'd already arrived at the black tie event, Ashley knew she was completely out of her league. The sight of the women with their professional style hair and expertly applied makeup, their perfect bodies draped in expensive designer gowns, their necks and ears dripping with gemstones, overwhelmed her. She felt like a cubic zirconia in a sea full of diamonds. Scanning the lawn adorned with white canopies erected above the table with white cloths and centerpiece of red lilies, she spotted her future mother-in-law in the midst of a group of women from the garden club. Miranda turned and met Ashley's gaze. Why was a simple glance from her fiance's mother so unsettling? It always felt as though she was being scrutinized even from across the lawn. She watched as Miranda approached wearing a black silk gown, her dark hair pulled into a perfect chignon. She greeted Brett first. Her fiancé kissed his mother's cheeks. "Just as gorgeous as always, Mom," he told her. "Where's Dad?" I believe he's with Dr. Simmons," she said, flashing her son a warm smile as she motioned toward the tent where the auction items were displayed. Miranda's face turned stoic as she eyed Ashley. "You look lovely, dear," she said. The comment sounded more like a subtle dig than a compliment. The gown Ashley wore might be off the rack, but it had been expensive. Her shoes as well, and the small diamond stud gracing her ears had been a Christmas present from Brett. She wondered what part of her outfit her fiance's mother had found lacking. "Thank you," Ashley began her reply, but Miranda had already pulled away to talk to another guest before she could get out. "So do you." Brett touched her arm, seemingly unaware of his mother's slight. "I'm going to talk with Dad for a minute, check out the auction items, then we'll meet back up when it's time to eat, okay?" She knew her fiance wanted to mingle, but Ashley wished he'd stay by her side, at least for a little while, just to give her a chance to get her bearings. Although with the group here this evening, she realized that was a near impossible task. Standing alone, feeling more like one of the hired help than a guest, Ashley accepted a glass of champagne from the tray carried by one of the serving attendants. She surveyed the growing crowd and noticed Bianca, tall and dark-haired like Brett, dressed in a red designer number that hugged every one of her perfect curves. Her fiance's sister stood talking with her best friend Wendy near the catering tent. Ashley had always felt intimidated by Brett's sister and her friends. It was as though she was an imposter among them, never really knowing what to say or how to act around the sophisticated young women, always feeling as though they were slightly judging her, knowing there was no way she could ever measure up to their standards. Deciding she should at least make an effort to fit in, Ashley strolled toward the two women. "How are the wedding plans coming?" Ashley asked her. The cost of the Hermes purse on the arm of the willowy blonde was most likely equivalent to 2 months of Brett's and Ashley mortgage, if not more. Ashley hesitated, not sure how to respond, remembering her conversation with Brett on the way to the auction. "Good," she finally replied. The planning part was going fine. The problem was her groom-to-be wouldn't even talk to her, making her wonder whether there would even be a wedding. Other than that, things were great. "Just make sure you pay attention to the old saying," Bianca taunted, a wicked gleam in her eyes. "First come marriage, not the baby carriage." Wendy and Bianca erupted in laughter. The words stung Ashley. She felt her face growing hot. Was her fiance's sister implying that she would have to become pregnant in order to get Brett to go through with the wedding? Had he spoken with his sister about their relationship problems? Did Bianca know something that Ashley didn't? "So, in other words, I shouldn't do things the way you did?" "Go ahead, Ashley," Ashley retorted, let her nerves get the better of her, referencing the fact that Bianca's wedding had taken place only 8.5 months before her son was born. Bianca stopped laughing and glared at her. The second the words spilled out, Ashley knew she never should have said them. She needed to get far away from her fiance's sister before the situation escalated. "Excuse me," she said, still evident in her tone. "I need to use the bathroom." Ashley placed the untouched champagne on top of one of the tables and darted towards the house. Entering through the back French door, she hurried past the first powder room and circled around to the other side of the house, choosing to retreat to the bathroom next to Clark's Holbrook study, the one on the first floor that was farthest from the activity. She locked the door and sank into the antique Georgian settee in the vanity area as tears welled in her eyes. Her relationship with Brett might be rocky at the moment, but she would never try to trap him into marriage, would never use the precious gift of a child as a weapon. Ashley wished she could transfer herself back in time and start over with her fiancé. If she told him everything about her life, all of her secrets from the beginning, they wouldn't have argued and could have faced the parole board hearing together. Knowing everything, Brett may not have asked her to marry him in the first place, but if he had, If he still loved her in spite of her past, their relationship would be solid now. Rising from the settee, she stood before the mirror and dabbed her eyes with a tissue, careful not to ruin her mascara. She had to pull herself together, go back to the party, find Brett, and force herself to endure the evening for his sake. She heard her phone chime, the text message ringtone. Pulling her cell from her small shoulder bag, she checked the screen. It was a text from Kyle. There was no message, just a link to an article on a Nashville television station website. She unlocked her phone and tapped the link. Ashley's breath caught in her throat when she saw the headline. Prison Break, Middle Tennessee State Penitentiary. Her heart began to pound as she read the news article. His mugshot stared back at her, his cold eyes boring into her soul. Her worst fear was now a reality. Ethan had escaped from prison. See you in chapter 8. Woo!